Hello everyone, thanks for tuning in. This is ARIRANG News and I'm Hyun-kyung in Seoul. Well, President Park Geun-hye is currently on a four-nation trip to the Middle East. Before leaving for Saudi Arabia, she met with Korean and local business communities in Kuwait. There, she emphasized the importance of bolstering bilateral ties on the economic front. ARIRANG's presidential office correspondent Choi You-sun files this report from Kuwait.
President Park Geun-hye continued to pitch Korean businesses in Kuwait, this time to the country's business community. At Monday's bilateral business forum, she highlighted a synergy effect that can be achieved from Korea and Kuwait joining their innovation and industrial diversification growth initiatives.
이제 이러한 양국의 경제 혁신 방향에 맞추어 경제 협력도 새로운 발걸음을 내디뎌야 합니다.
Referring to Kuwait's distribution infrastructure project, President Park said Korean companies are more than ready to participate, citing their 40-year experience in Kuwaiti infrastructure building. She also talked about visiting a site earlier where Korean companies are currently building a 48-kilometer-long bridge across the Bay of Kuwait. The Korean president then emphasized a need for Korea and Kuwait to upgrade their cooperation in energy from the current oil trade to joint ventures in oil exploration, development and production, as well as non-traditional energy sources like shale gas. More than 100 Korean and Kuwaiti SMEs held one-on-one business sessions where a dozen deals worth $135 million are near to being signed.
It's a shopping mall that has a 2-kilometer roof, and Korea's District Holdings has concluded a deal to build a children's cafe there worth some $100,000.
President Park now travels to Saudi Arabia, the second leg of her Middle East tour. Meeting with the leaders of Korea's top oil-supplying nation, she plans to use diplomacy to expand cooperation into the fields of nuclear energy, healthcare, and ICT. Choi You-sun, ARIRANG News, Kuwait City.
A Toronto-based church says it has lost contact with its Korean-Canadian pastor for more than a month now. The pastor was in North Korea for a humanitarian mission, and this is raising fears that he might be held captive by the communist regime. For more on this story, here's ARIRANG's Hwang Sung-hee.
It wasn't his first visit to North Korea. Korean-Canadian pastor Reverend Im Hyun-soo had made numerous trips to oversee a nursing home, a nursery, and an orphanage in North Korea's northeastern city of Rajin. That's why his Toronto-based Light Korean Presbyterian Church wasn't initially worried when they lost contact with him. After last hearing from Im on January 31st, the church expected him to be out of contact until February 4th. When Im didn't contact them, members of the church waited another 21 days to allow for a possible Ebola quarantine. North Korea's anti-Ebola measures require foreign visitors to be placed under quarantine for 3 weeks. Im had been involved in a variety of missionary projects in North Korea for more than 20 years. The Canadian government says consular officials are in contact with Im's family, but declined to comment on Im's situation. North Korea takes a hard line against religion of any sort, seeing it as a threat to the ruling Kim dynasty. While a UN report estimates up to 400,000 of North Korea's 24 million population are Christians, that number is impossible to verify because none of them can freely practice their religion. In 2007, a Korean-Canadian pastor was detained by North Korean authorities for worshipping in public. Hwang Sung-hee, ARIRANG News.
In the meantime, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry has slammed North Korea for its human rights abuses, saying tens of thousands of people are living as virtual slaves. In his keynote speech at the 28th UN Human Rights Council in Geneva on Monday, Kerry said there is no freedom of expression in the North since Kim Jong-un executes anyone who disagrees with him. He added that for decades, the North Korean regime has subjugated its citizens through starvation and torture, causing causing hundreds of thousands of people to lose their lives. Kerry said the report published by the UN Commission of Inquiry on North Korea's human rights record last year led to a clear condemnation of what is happening inside that country. Now, following a huge backlash in South Korea, Washington has stressed that the controversial comments made by a top U.S. official, Wendy Sherman, on East Asian affairs were in no way targeting any specific country. But watchers in Seoul say it's still not enough to calm the waters. ARIRANG's Kim has more.
Washington has moved to clarify recent controversial comments made by a senior U.S. official and said its stance on historical tensions in Northeast Asia remains the same. This comes after U.S. Undersecretary of State Wendy Sherman on Friday urged leaders to refrain from stirring up nationalist feelings. Seoul's foreign ministry had responded quickly, saying it would not take her comments lightly. Sherman's remarks were seen as being directed at South Korea and China, which are critical of Japan for denying its wartime atrocities, such as its sexual enslavement of women. And looking to diffuse the controversy, the U.S. State Department said Sherman's comments were not directed at a particular leader in the region. It added that South Korea and Japan are Washington's most important U.S. allies in East Asia, and that it's important that Seoul and Tokyo maintain constructive relations for peace and prosperity in the region.
Obviously, our three countries share a lot in common, and in no way was she speaking about any one person or any one country.
Harf did not elaborate, but the State Department told Seoul-based Yonhap News Agency that historical issues should be dealt with in a manner that promotes healing and reconciliation. It emphasized that Japan's past statements apologizing to the victims of its wartime aggression marked an important chapter in Japan improving relations with its neighbors. However, there are voices of concern that the U.S. doesn't want to involve itself in Northeast Asia history because it wants to maintain its relationship with Japan. Experts say Washington is seeking to strengthen its relationship with Japan and Korea to counter China's growing military presence in East Asia. Kim, ARIRANG News.
China's top political advisors have gathered to kickstart the country's biggest annual political meeting. The first of the two big sessions, the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference, has just gotten underway in Beijing. It will cover many topics, but one garnering lots of attention is the country's military spending plans. ARIRANG's Kwon So-ah has more.
Military spending is sure to be one of the hot topics on the table at this year's two major political meetings in Beijing. Chinese President Xi Jinping's vision for a strong China includes building a stronger army.
National defense modernization is the key to modern warfare. It's like the nerves inside the body.
China's military spending had been on the decline until 2013, but increased by 12% last year to more than $130 billion, putting China behind top military spender, the United States. China's defense budget is expected to increase again this year, especially given the country's involvement in a territorial dispute with Japan over an island chain in the East China Sea, and Tokyo's announcement earlier this year of its biggest defense budget ever.
An expansion of military power according to a nation's economic growth is inevitable. The same goes for China.
There is global interest in the upcoming announcement as many countries try to narrow the gap in military spending with China. China's 2015 defense budget is expected to be unveiled on the opening day of the National People's Congress on Thursday. Kwon So-ah, ARIRANG News.
After years of political wrangling, a comprehensive anti-corruption bill is set to pass the National Assembly sometime this afternoon. Once signed into law, people with some public influence, for example, government officials, lawmakers, reporters, and the faculty of public and private schools, could be hit with up to 3 years in prison if they take money or valuables worth more than 1 million won, that's roughly $900 from one person in one go. The spouses of public officials will also be subject to the new law, but not their immediate or extended family members. The parties also decided to allow a 1.5-year grace period for enforcement of the law from the date of its passage as proposed by the government. Consumer prices in Korea last month grew at the slowest pace in nearly 16 years. Data released by Statistics Korea shows that prices went up by a mere 0.5% from a year earlier in February, growing in the 0% range for the third month in a row. Officials attributed the low growth to the recent drop in global oil prices, which has dragged down domestic oil prices by over 5% during the period. Some analysts have voiced concerns about the possibility of deflation, while others have ruled it out, citing the fact that core inflation, which excludes petroleum products, grew by 2.3% from a year ago. Now, Korea's leading automaker Hyundai Motor appears to be having quite a hard time on its home turf as imported brands continue to make inroads here. A Hyundai official speaking on condition of anonymity says it will be hard for the company to secure a 40% market share in Korea by the end of the year if no measures to counter foreign competition are taken. The automaker's market share in January fell to below 40%, and industry watchers say the February figure could drop even further since there were fewer work days due to the Lunar New Year holiday. Hyundai's market share last year stood at roughly 41%, while its affiliate Kia Motors stood at 28%. That's the first time their combined market share has dropped below 70% since Hyundai and Kia merged in 1998. The amount of money Koreans spend overseas appears to be increasing. Many factors are in play, but one outstanding is the surge in people traveling abroad despite the sluggish economic recovery in Korea. ARIRANG's Shin Se-min tells us more.
Koreans spent the highest amount of money on overseas travel in January, breaking the record set last July. Data released by the Bank of Korea Tuesday shows that the January figure was more than $1.9 billion, up 17% from the same month last year. More Koreans are traveling overseas these days due to a weak Japanese yen and low oil prices, which drove down airline ticket prices and in turn boosted overseas spending. Koreans' total overseas credit card spending was more than $12 billion last year, including direct purchases from websites overseas. Koreans spent $1.5 billion on credit card purchases from foreign websites, 55 times more than the $28 million spent by foreign shoppers on Korean websites during the same period. The imbalance has raised concerns at a time when Korea's domestic economy remains sluggish. Experts say the imbalance should be monitored, and they urge measures to boost domestic spending, in particular by bringing more foreign tourists to Korea. Shin Se-min, ARIRANG News.
The burden on Korea's shrinking working population to support the elderly has increased at a worrying rate in recent years. Figures released by Statistics Korea on Tuesday show that the number of elderly people between 15 and 64 will have to support has more than tripled over the last 4 decades. This year, the ratio of working-age people to people over 65 is estimated to be 100 to 18. Now, this figure is the highest since the government began tracking the data in 1970. Experts warn that if the aging society continues in tandem with the low birth rate, it will have a devastating effect on the economy. They suggest increasing women's economic participation by creating a more flexible work environment and expanding child care services. Now, the number of billionaires globally is on the rise, and joining them this year is NBA star Michael Jordan. The former Chicago Bulls shooting guard was one of 290 new faces on Forbes magazine's rich list. Following the footsteps of Bill Gates, who topped the list this year for the 16th time, were tech entrepreneurs from Uber, Airbnb, and Snapchat, all under the age of 40. China was the country with the largest class of new billionaires, adding 71 to its list, followed by the U.S., India, and Germany. Now, Korea's Lee Geun-hye, chairman of Samsung Group, came in at number 110, down 8 slots from last year.
Bringing you the fresh updates from stories breaking in Korea and abroad. We give you a bigger and better picture of the world. Join Hyun-kyung live from Seoul. Every weekday, only on ARIRANG.
A major offensive is underway in Iraq to take back the strategic city of Tikrit from Islamic State militants. It's a massive operation with forces numbering in the tens of thousands, and victory is crucial for future plans to retake Mosul, Iraq's second largest city, also under IS control. Son Jung-in has the story.
The thunderous sounds of artillery and warplanes were heard outside Tikrit as Iraqi forces attacked Islamic State strongholds in the northern province of Salahuddin.
We prepared these weapons to dislodge the extremists from Tikrit.
The Iraqi Prime Minister ordered forces to regain the territory and to avoid killing civilians.
Our goal is to release the ordinary people from oppression and terror threats from IS. We must protect the lives of civilians and the property in the city.
The massive operation to retake Tikrit from the IS group is reportedly made up of some 30,000 soldiers. The Saddam Hussein's hometown fell into the hands of the extremist group last summer. The Iraqi military commander of the Salahuddin region, Abdul Wahab al-Sadi, told state television that the operation was going as planned. Latest reports say Iraqi forces have seized at least 2 districts near Tikrit. The number of casualties is still being verified. Unlike other anti-IS operations in Iraq and Syria, the United States is taking a back seat this time, as Iraq did not ask for any support or U.S. involvement. Instead, Iran's military is playing a significant role in helping Iraq drive the Islamic State militants from Tikrit. Capturing the town is viewed as crucial in any future plans to retake Mosul, Iraq's second largest city, also under IS control. U.S. military officials have said that mission could be launched as early as April. Son Jung-in, ARIRANG News.
In other international news we're following, as we said earlier, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry is in Geneva to attend the UN Human Rights Council meeting, but that's not the only thing on his agenda by far. He is also talking with his Iranian counterpart to hammer out a framework for a nuclear deal ahead of a deadline later this month. Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is in Washington preparing to make his case before the U.S. Congress squarely against that nuclear deal. The Israeli leader addressed a pro-Israel lobbying group on Monday, where he said he had a, quote, moral obligation to speak up against a nuclear Iran that would pose a threat to his country's survival. He also underlined that his speech was not meant to disrespect U.S. President Barack Obama in any way. Now, feeling angry from time to time is perfectly normal, but flying into an uncontrollable rage could be a sign of bigger underlying issues. Young men are said to be more prone to these feelings, but there are ways to channel this energy in a more positive way. For this story, here's ARIRANG's Kim Min-ji.
A man recently drove his car into his girlfriend for breaking up with him. And another became violent in the middle of a highway tunnel after another driver did not give way to him. These are just a couple of cases that show individuals failing to control their anger. The intense rush of uncontrollable rage is normally linked to some kind of personality or behavioral disorder. A recent study revealed that out of 13,000 people who were treated for such disorders last year, 2/3 were under 30 years old. What's especially interesting is that although the overall number of patients hasn't changed much in recent years, the proportion of men in their 20s jumped 13% over the past 5 years.
This might be due to young patients feeling they were not rewarded enough for their efforts during their teens, and the anger and frustration builds up. They can feel no regrets about their bursts of anger as they feel they have the right to be angry.
Personality or behavioral disorders are not only characterized by angry outbursts. People with interpersonal problems and those who refuse to believe they have done anything wrong in certain situations may also have a disorder. Doctors say that finding a healthy and undisruptive way to release built-up anger and stress is key to alleviating such disorders. Taking the anger out on other people actually increases the frustration and can sometimes lead to bigger, even legal problems. Experts say the best approach is to focus on relatively strenuous activities like hiking or running, or having a hobby to focus on. Kim Min-ji, ARIRANG News.
And shifting gears to the cultural front, a set of photographs taken in Korea during the late 19th and early 20th century has been revealed in the U.S. Now, some of them include never-before-seen images of key figures in Korea's history. Our Im Yun-hee has more.
The fifth son of Korea's Emperor Gwangmu, Prince Yi-kang lived during a tumultuous time in Korean history, during the First Sino-Japanese War. This recently discovered shot is one of the earliest pictures of the prince, taken in 1899 when he left to study abroad in the United States. Another photograph is of Heungseon Daewon-gun, known to some Westerners as Prince Kung. He served as regent of the Joseon dynasty while King Gojong was a minor during the 1860s. The picture on the right, believed to be him in his 40s, shows a much younger version of him. Seo Jae-pil, also known as Philip Jason, was a leader in Korea's fight for independence, even putting together the doomed Kapsin coup to oust the Joseon-era leadership. He was the first Korean to receive U.S. citizenship, and this new picture on the left shows a young 23-year-old Seo, taken in 1887. Another leader of the failed Kapsin coup was Park Geun-hye, this rare image of the Korean politician at 25 before his involvement with the Enlightened movement of Korea. And lastly, Kim Ok-yoon, a reformist during the late Joseon dynasty. The image on the left shows him at 35 years old, and though there are many black and white photos of him, this is the first known color photograph of Kim. And while these pictures reveal a small piece of Korea's history, musician Hwang Byung-gi holds on to history in his own way. For decades, he's been a master of the popular gayagum, one of Korea's most played traditional Korean instruments. And now, a new book about Hwang, compiled by English scholar Andrew Killick over 25 years, has recently been published in Korean. Im Yun-hee, ARIRANG News.
Welcome back. I'm Michelle Park here with the latest weather forecast. It was snowing and raining here in Korea this morning, but it has returned at the moment. And meanwhile, there is a light layer of fog across the whole nation. The morning precipitation has cleared most of the fine dust away and the levels are back to normal. However, there will be sudden increase throughout the day, so stay updated if you're planning on going outside. Now, today is also going to be pretty gray due to the low pressure front in the atmosphere. Now, along with the gloomy skies, the precipitation is expected to continue throughout the day and into the evening. Snow is mostly expected in the upper parts of the peninsula, such as over in Gangwon province, while the rest of the country below the central region will see up to 5 millimeters of rain. Now, going over to our readings for today, so it will be lingering around 5 this afternoon, while Gwangju and Busan will both get up to 8 degrees. And to other regions, Jeju Island gets up to 10, Dokdo hits down to 7, while Mangeungang is chilly and snowing at -3 degrees. That's all for now, Michelle Park, and here's a look at the weather conditions around the world.
And that's ARIRANG News for now. I'm Laah Hyun-kyung in Seoul. From me and the rest of the team in Seoul, thank you very much for staying with us. We'll be back with all of that and more at 6 p.m. Korea time.